Hi, everyone. This is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Always warm, always sunny, sometimes Colorado. Today is July 20th, 2023. I'm here finally back in Colorado. I've been traveling a bit. I was just in Edinburgh with many of you. Before that, I was in Papua New Guinea, and it's been a wild ride the last 60 days. I think I'm getting old. White's coming in the beard. But it was actually really wonderful to engage with the community at the Capstone 1694 workshop. And it was really a roll up of the commentary of over 1,000 people from 50 different workshops, about half virtual, half in person throughout the world. What we learned from the process is that we continue to have probably the best community of any cryptocurrency. And there's a lot of alignment on the idea of minimum viable governance and a lot of amazing ideas about how do we take minimum viable governance, build something functional, and move it to something the community can then use to transform Cardano into something that engages as many people as possible in its community, as opposed to a subset of that. Now, Node 8.2 is near imminent, and it's carrying with it SanchoNet. So what we broke down is a series of milestones in SanchoNet that will flesh out a full implementation of 1694, allowing people to test what it's like being a DREP, submitting a constitutional update, uh, writing custom code for DREPs, including smart contracts and managing multiple users as a DREP, build political parties, software like dashboards, accountability software, a whole bunch of things. And so it's going to be a very vibrant summer and a lot of stuff is going to happen. And there's some great community events like Rare Evo and CNFTCon that are going to be events we attend, but also the community attends. And there's a lot of opportunity to kind of parse and discuss uh, learnings from that test net. At some point, there'll be community-wide vote for ratification of 1694. And then it's just a matter of what level of quality assurance is required to do a hard fork should the community decide this is what they want to do. There's a lot of things that have also launched. For example, major changes to Catalyst, the Intersect organization, which is the members-based organization we keep talking about. Already 150 people have joined it. And throughout the summer, there's going to be a lot of grants coming out of the new DevTrust for Cardano and a lot of elaboration about how that works. So in the process of this, there's a boatload of people who are coming out of the woodworks, both in a positive sense and a negative sense, expressing opinions about where we should go, what we should do, what's legitimate, what's illegitimate. And that's exactly what should be expected because people are growing up. The ecosystem is growing up. And we've entered a new era of Cardano where there are many voices, and those voices are going to have to find a way to compromise, agree with each other. Now, the good news is we predicted as a project this state, and it's a healthy one. And so a lot of the institutions that have been put into place and discussion mechanisms that were put into place, I think will be invaluable for the community to get to a point where we converge as opposed to diverge, and we're able to move forward. For example, the workshops that were held in 1694 followed a very tight moderator pattern that a lot of people agreed was very productive to actually have meaningful conversations and give people the right to be heard, a super important thing. So those skills and techniques are not a one-off for a particular workshop, but are now belong to a very large set of the governance community in Cardano to use for their own workshops and their own dialogue and discourse. Um, Now, the other thing that's been happening is that we've done a really good job of speeding up development. You may have noticed that there's been several major releases of things, like, for example, Mithril, and it's starting to work its way to mainnet. And we just made an announcement there. Hydra's still moving at an extraordinary pace. The development of Cardano Node, now that we're on the 8.x, is moving very quickly. Lace has a monthly release cycle, and we've already gotten to version 1.3. 1.4 is on the horizon here in just a little bit. So because of this release cadence, we're starting to actually see a lot of really cool features coming. For example, BLS support in Plutus is on the horizon. There's a lot of really cool things to announce second half of this year about the sidechain strategy and what will come to play. So IO as an engineering firm has finally found, I think, a healthy balance of rigor and formalism. For example, with the Conway era will be the very first era of Cardano to move to a full, true formal specification with code extraction. So we actually have an AGDA specification of the Voltaire ledger logic, and we can extract from that Haskell code and compare it to the production system. So, from a testing viewpoint with constraint satisfaction testing, model checking, property-based testing, there's never been a more rigorous but yet effective and efficient time to participate. So, there's a lot of great progress in these types of things, but then there's also been a lot of great progress in workflow. The new PI system that runs quarterly is moving over to Intersect, the members-based organization. So we have tribes within our development teams, like the Sidechains tribe, the Core Ledger team, Voltaire tribe, Smart Contracts tribes. And what we can do is mirror the leadership structure as committees at the members-based organization, Intersect, and Intersect can manage those committees. We can join them, but members of the community can also join them, which means that when you sum up what they do, they write the product backlog that gets executed on a quarterly basis, which means the product backlog actually turns into a full open source program. And we've learned a lot about how to do this in practice from projects like Hydra, for example, which have a very high level of community participation and a pretty agile, high volume process. Some things are going to have to be migrated from Jira to GitHub and to other open project management systems. And that's going to be some of the growing pains as the repositories move from the input output repositories to the Intersect repositories and people become contributors. The good news is that there's never been a better time to participate in the development of Cardano. For example, when we had our workshops in Edinburgh, there were 5 different sets of them. One involved inviting members of the community to come together to design a SIP for wallet integration for voting tools, SIP 95. It's being co-designed with the wallet makers. And we all worked together, had a hackathon, and an enormous amount of progress got made very quickly to avoid the mistakes made with the rollout of SIP 30, which was very nice. But unfortunately, because of version differences, it created incompatibilities and made it real hard for a lot of people to deploy a wallet that worked with all the wallets. And people had to work around. Very similar to mistakes Internet Explorer 6 made with the implementation of the CSS standard, and where you had to actually break your sheets for them to work. That got fixed, but it was painful to fix. And we want to avoid that, with future SIPs. And it was really cool to see the community come together and co-author, co-write that standard and move very quickly for voting tools that can be useful for SanchoNet and eventually the mainnet. So it's a new dawn for collaboration and for interoperability integration. And a lot of projects are starting to get elevated, and there's a lot of diversity forming. This AGDA specification, for example, at some point it's going to work its way through the totality of Cardano, and then the sum of that would actually be one set of blueprints to show the canonical design of Cardano. What that functionally means is, for the first time ever, we'd have an end-to-end specification, which is implementation independent, that can be used for third parties to build competing clients for Cardano, which is a major milestone forward, but do so in a way where those clients can enjoy similar quality to what people have enjoyed with Cardano itself in the Haskell sense. So I would love to see a Rust and a TypeScript client, for example, but a lot of work has to be done to get us to that moment. And we've already taken a major leap forward to facilitate that. And the governance of Cardano can make priorities and decide whether it makes sense to move towards a polyglot ecosystem, amongst many other things to do. Our role is really moving towards a time and materials business as usual on a quarterly basis, get some great things done, but then also it frees up other parts of the organization to really start looking ahead to the future, 2025, 2027, and asking some very fundamental questions. Like, how do we become a 4th generation cryptocurrency? How do we build a system that is as useful as possible to 1 billion people for many different use cases and ultimately transform their lives? At the end of the day, Cardano is an ecosystem built upon exponential technologies, but we have yet to fully take advantage of those technologies and get them into everyday people's lives. another part of my company, can then also focus a lot on building on top of Cardano. Many of you are fans of and know of, for example, Midnight, and you know of our RealFi plans about getting real finance into the hands of people in Africa and other places in the world. These are aspirations we've had for a long time, in some cases deep R&D projects we've had for a long time, but we're building them on Cardano for the people of Cardano and the broader ecosystem of the cryptocurrency space. It's real exciting to be able to build those products and let them compete and do cool things. So when one changes a role, you get some of the past, but then also you get new things in the future. In terms of the vision thing, there's now a way to debate and ratify it through a members-based organization, Intersect, and there's also a way to vote on it. That's the point of 1694. And the community can decide whether that vision makes sense or another vision or a hybrid vision, for example, makes sense. The single most important thread amongst all of this is realizing that we all have to upgrade the EQ, not just the IQ. Cardano has the highest IQ, 180 papers and moon math and all kinds of magic. And it's not easy to write active specifications. It's not easy to write Haskell code. People absolutely understand the rigor, discipline, and sheer brilliance of the research side. What's missing is the human element. If we're going to win, if we're truly going to get to number one, we don't have leaders. We have each other. And that means we have to work well together, which means we have to understand each other. We have to listen to each other. We have to have a high degree of empathy for each other's positions and truly try to understand, not talk at and shout over, but listen to each other in a way that allows us to learn from each other and understand each other's values. Then and only then can we get to one backlog that we can all agree is a useful backlog for moving forward. The debate cannot be done on Twitter. Certainly you can try to drag it there, but remember that social media is built from the ground up to divide us, make us angry, and to reduce the depth of a conversation to something shallow. It's also fundamentally unfair to think people are one-dimensional. The reality is we're very complicated. One of the things I was most proud of when we put all these workshops together with the community for SIP 1694 was the diversity of people in the room. There were people who worked really hard to travel all throughout South America, including wrote a candidate constitution and principles, almost revolutionaries inside the room. We're real proud of them. There are people who put workshops throughout Africa, like Mercy, for example, in Ghana. Wonderful woman with a huge heart who brought a lot of voices that normally don't get heard. We had people from Australia, New Zealand, people throughout Asia, people throughout Europe and North America, all in one place, representing the voices of thousands of people. We come from different languages, different cultures, but we have a common goal that we just want a better world, and we think we've stumbled across some tools that can get us there in a very ethical way. So one of the biggest areas of upgrades and emphasis is not to do with protocols or software at all. It has to do with communication, and it has to do with respect and empathy. It's going to be tough because we all have to grow. We all have to learn. But if we do that, we will have created an ecosystem that is worthy of having 1 billion users and transforming the entire world. If we fail to do that, the best case scenarios, we will have produced a lot of really interesting technology and potentially some market value for that technology, but will be a footnote in history as we get replaced by the people who did figure that out. This ecosystem is built for everybody, by everybody, for the purpose of making everything everywhere better for everyone. That's just the fact. And that's the intent. So we'll get there. It's just going to be a little while. There's now so many different ways to participate, from the SIP editor process to SanchoNet, to building governance software, to participating as a DREP, to joining Intersect, to building new software in the ecosystem, to contributing to an open source project like TXPipe or Hydra in the ecosystem, to being core developer. All of these opportunities and options are yours. Or you can just talk about it, and that's valuable too. Talk about it on YouTube, do some interviews. host some Twitter spaces. A lot of really cool people there. Cardano Stoners Club, for example, was represented in 1694. Never thought to see them there, but they were there. And I remember some of my fondest memories are joining late at night on Twitter and talking to them. And it was real cool to see that they're engaged and they want to educate people as well. So that is where we're at. So a lot of conversations to come, a lot of hard decisions to come, some philosophical, some practical, but we will, as one community, one ecosystem, get there. I have absolute confidence in it. And now that we're a little freed up as we move to this new paradigm to think about a vision, you know what? There's a lot of great moonshots. There's a lot of great technology. And one of our other superpowers is Cardano has within its ecosystem an entity that has the best engineers in the world and the largest cryptocurrency research group in the world that now has good operations, good velocity, and a lot of domain experience. Some people like to point out that there's been delays. Some people like to point out that we missed some deadlines. Some people like to point out that version 1 wasn't as good as it needed to be. Those people tend to forget that the iPhone launched without the App Store or 3G. Do you remember that? Because that's not what great products are about. Great products at the end of the day are about the vision, the community, and ultimately the evolution. How fast can they get something new and interesting? And how do they take that new and interesting thing and really give you some experience you've never had before? When we look to the future and the vision, there's plenty of things we're going to need to do to clean things up, improve TPS, make transactions a little better, make it easier to write smart contracts. But let's look at how far we've gone. It wasn't too long ago that we didn't even have smart contracts in the system. Now we're in version 2, soon to be in version 3 of Plutus, and we've already gotten a 10x improvement in many different categories. And it's much easier to write contracts today than it was just a year ago. Think about how quickly we can move to a new state, yet we keep our principles of determinism, predictability, and security. Whereas our competitors, it's not like they're hard to get these things. By design, they can't have them. It's a pretty magical thing to doggedly hold on to one's integrity, because when times get a little tough, people truly do value the institutions that can't lie and the institutions that can't fail. As slow as we've been, for over 2,000 days, Cardano has never failed. That's a pretty remarkable thing when millions of people tried to break it, and it lived through pandemics, staff changes, markets up, markets down, and everything in between. We're resilient, and that's because of the integrity of the process. We won't lose that. We're just going to make the process better every day and eventually conquer the world. So thank you all for listening. It's a pleasure to be here. It's good to be back, and we got some work to do. We're going for number 1.